let me speak at three levels. The first is to speak about my frustration as a Nigerian. The illusion that we have about free, about peaceful election, first of all, is an illusion because there's no human activity that we can describe as being peaceful. And if you're talking of a multi-ethnic society like ours, whereas we Nigerians have conceded that 65% of our land is, what's the expression that is being used, is not occupied, taken over by bandits and so on. I think the assumptions we have is that the ritual we've been going through of conducting elections, the routine, we've been very successful in the rubrics, but the challenge has been the outcome. And I speak a word I don't like to use, that I am supposed to be a minority because my ethnic group doesn't have enough numbers. And despite my education, as things stand in Nigeria, concretized, you know, you have injustice that has been concretized over time, repeated over and over and over, and it has become embedded in culture. The possibility of either myself or any Christian minority becoming president of Nigeria is almost non-existent. Because had President Jonathan decided to choose Matthew Kukah as a presidential running mate, the immediate reaction will be from the Northerners and Muslims, how can two Christians govern Nigeria? Should I, for example, want to run for office as a Christian, and I decide that I want to choose somebody from the South, I'll get basically the same response. And the politicians have just taken it for granted. And it's been embedded in our political culture that when you're talking about a political candidate from northern Nigeria, you understand what you're talking about. It doesn't include a Christian. Now, you know, the issues going forward about violence, no, every armed robbers like to live in peace. The question that we think we are not framing correctly, we assume that people who use the word problems are people who don't like the country. The truth of the matter is that we don't like the country we are living in because it has refused to design the architecture of fairness, equity, and inclusion. If you look at the American Constitution, when it was conceived, there was no place for black people. There was no place for women. There was no place for even white men who were poor. But between 1865 and 1870, just 3 years, the Americans were able to effect 3 fundamental amendments to their constitution. Amendment number 13, amendment number 14, amendment number 15, which opened the first is ended slavery. Then it made it possible for ordinary people to claim equal citizenship. And finally, the 15th Amendment guaranteed equal rights for black people to vote. As it is in Nigeria today, the whole question of citizenship hangs in a balance and is in suspended animation because we're not common citizens. I will recommend, please, if you have a pen, there are 2 books that I think you must read, especially those who want to be in power. There's a book called Caste, The Origins of Discontent. It's written by an American professor, an incredibly beautiful book. But it focuses on why are black people discontented in America. The second book is by Francis Fukuyama, who published in 1989, before the collapse of, about the time the Berlin Wall collapsed, a book titled The End of History. But he's published a little book titled Identity, The Demands of Dignity and the Politics of Resentment. I make the point because in all of this, it is important that if we're going to have a system of political participation that is inclusive, it is important that we understand what do we mean when we talk about a multi-ethnic nation. Chapter 2 of our Constitution is supposed to be the basis from where all political parties derive the instruments for their manifestos. But in Nigeria, you hear politicians tell you, oh, the manifesto for my party was written in my bedroom. And yet, in section 15 of chapter 2 of the Constitution, there are certain provisions that are so basic, but Nigeria has refused to pay attention to them. They include, for example, the composition of the government at the federal and the state level, the provision of facilities for mobility, residency rights, and the encouragement of intermarriages. But today we are being held hostage by cultures that are inimical to democracy but are being presented as religion. So I think that I'm just making the fundamental point that, look, we all love democracy. And the unfortunate thing with the Nigerian democracy is that ordinary people love the democracy more than the politicians themselves. Because whereas we stand in the sun, we stand in the rain, and we get killed, but we still go to vote. The politician, as the secretary to government himself has said, the Nigerian politician believes that the only party that is relevant is a wheelbarrow that can wheel him to power. If he misses this one, he jumps to another one. So the lack of discipline by the political actors themselves is what predisposes our elections to violence. Ordinary Nigerians across the board have no problems of religion. It is the manipulation and the systematic manipulation